Okay, hi, sorry. Okay, welcome first of all. Sorry, I still have a problem here because I hear my voice. Unfortunately, I don't know where the problem lies. Okay, but let's start. Let's try. Okay, then after the break, I'll shut down everything and start everything again, and then see what's going on. Okay, at home, can you hear me at home?
Yes.
Okay, great. Everything okay at home? Okay, so let me know if there are any problems. Can you see also the screen? I guess yes. Okay, so welcome to this second part of this course on sustainable resource economics and policy. I'm Rainer Andergassen, so if you need to get in contact with me, you can send me an email. This is my email address, okay, so if you need to get in contact with me. Okay, so on Virtuale, you already got access in the first part. You can download the slides, okay, and they are 90% complete. Okay, I think I'll make some changes on the second slide. Second group of slides, okay, in a couple of days. So just I think I'll add something, and but otherwise they're complete. Okay, so my suggestion is print them and take notes on the slides, okay, or just have a look on the slides at your screen, okay, whatever, and but try to take notes on what I add to the slides rather than just copying what's on the slides here displayed on the screen, okay? So, are there any questions? So, before starting and going to the contents of this course, just an organizational point here I would like to make. So, we have lectures on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. What I would like to suggest is start, if possible, at noon. I don't know, do you have lectures before noon? Because I have a lecture at 3 p.m. So I would like, if possible, start at noon. Then take a break for lunch at about 1 p.m., 1 p.m., something like this, for half an hour. Okay, and then we'll start again after the break for the second part of the lectures. Okay, so masks are still compulsory, unfortunately. Okay, so sorry. Any other questions? Something I forgot? So I do not have a very big introduction here because Tavoni already introduced the course, so I guess I would like to straightforwardly go to the contents of this course. We can discuss contents and yeah, then some information about the exam. So okay, so before going to the content, just what we are going to see here is some theory together with some practice. So what I would like to do is I'm going to give you a theoretical introduction to these topics, and then for each topic I will also give you a more practical approach. So on the one side what the theory tells us, and then on the other side was what the empirics tells us. Okay? That's why for all of the topics we're going to see, I'm going to show you on the one side theory, and then on the other side how the theory is then implemented from an empirical point of view, even though I won't go into the technical details of the empirics. Okay, I will just show you how then certain things are tested or brought to the data in order to stimulate you, okay, to think about problems not only from a theoretical point of view, but also from an empirical point of view, okay? And that's what I try to do, and so I try to give you both sides, okay, the theory and the practice, okay, what's done. So this is a course about environmental resources, okay, so the first part is on environment and trade, and that's related to the first part of the course, okay, that you have seen, because the first part was more or less on international environmental agreements, okay, how to reach an agreement from an given that problems are. Sorry, I have a very bad background noise here. I don't know if you can hear it. That's quite disturbing. But, okay, so the first part is about environment, again from a global perspective, okay, and in particular here the point I'm taking is environment and trade, okay, so how environmental resources are related to international trade. And in particular here what we are going to see is that there will be specialization, okay, in terms of environmental resources and the problems that arise here. In particular, I will talk about carbon leakage and other things, both from, again, from a theoretical and empirical point of view. Before this, I will briefly talk about environmental regulation, because I think you have, but this is at least what happened in the past years. I don't know if it changed over the years, but there was no real discussion about environmental regulation. I won't go again into all the details. Okay, I will just give you a broad overview of environmental regulation. It's a very basic stuff. Again, from an empirical point, from a theoretical point of view and an empirical point of view. Okay, I'll show you what the results of some environmental regulations are. Okay, in particular, I'll talk about EU and some other cases. Okay. And this is necessary because then in trade and environment, I'll use environmental regulation, okay? And therefore I need to level the playing field, okay? Because some of you have taken, I don't know, environmental economics in their undergraduate studies, and that's why they already know. These others come from, I don't know, different background and never have heard about environmental regulation. So that's why I would like here to level the playing field and talk explicitly about environmental regulation and very basic stuff. Okay, so again, not going into the particular technical details at this point in time. Then I'll talk about trade and environment, and this is the first part of the course. And the second part of the course is I'll talk mainly about non-renewable resources, non-renewable environmental resources. And the optimal and efficient use of these environmental resources. Okay, so in particular, I will talk about extraction, okay, of optimal extraction of oil, for instance. Okay, and so what is the optimal use of these non-renewable resources? And also, given that these the extraction and the use of these non-renewable resources leads to pollution, okay, environmental pollution. Okay? This will be the second part of the course. Okay, so that's why again, two parts are not directly related, because the first part is more on the environment pollution. The second part is about the optimal use of mainly non-renewable resources. I will also talk about renewable resources, but not again very detailed. I mainly talk about non-renewable resources here and the efficient optimal use, and I also talk about the social optimality of optimally using the non-renewable resources. Okay, so I'll also talk about the intergenerational trade-off that that we'll face here. Okay, so meaning that resources that are used today are not available tomorrow, and this leads to an intergenerational trade-off. Okay? And therefore, I'll talk also about the social optimality of efficient and optimal use of non-renewable resources. Okay, this is the outline of the course. Then in a minute I go into the details and give you a more detailed description of what we're going to see. Okay, just to give you a kind of working plan. Okay, so what we're going to see. But before going to this, I'll briefly talk about what I would like to talk briefly about. Can we hear? Yeah, I know. I can hear it as well, Salvatore. I don't know. I hear it as well. So there's a very bad background noise. So perhaps if you give me 5 minutes, I'm going to restart perhaps the iPad here, because I think it comes from my iPad. Okay, so I don't know why. So give me just 5 minutes and I restart it. Okay, because I have here very bad. You don't hear it most likely, but they at home hear it and I hear it as well, and it's very bad. Okay, so just 5 minutes and I start. So usually these things happen just the first lecture. Okay, so the first lecture, once things are, yeah, okay, shut this down. Okay, so once things are set up once, they should be fine also in the future. So I don't know why. Okay, wait a second. Okay, I have to switch off this. Okay, I think it disappeared because I forgot to. Okay, yes, now it should be fine. Is it fine also at home? Because I think what I forgot to uncheck was. Okay, so thanks. Okay, okay, yes, it was really annoying also for me. Okay, really distracting. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, I was talking about the exam. Okay, so what about the exam? Okay, the exam, there will be, perhaps Taboni already told you about the exam. Details are on the website, okay, on Virtuale UNIBO IT, okay, you can find all the details. And as things change, we'll update the web page. But concerning my part, okay, there will be 2 questions. Questions will be open type questions. There won't be specific questions asking specific details of models, because what we're going to see is, as I mentioned before, we're going to see theoretical models as well as empirical results. Okay, there won't be specific questions about mathematical details or mathematical models. Okay, there will be broad questions. Okay, and as I'll go over the material, I'll give you hints. Okay, about what questions would look like or could look like. Okay, so again, there will be questions like, okay, so for instance, carbon leakage. What is carbon leakage? And yeah, so you have to talk about carbon leakage both from the theoretical and empirical point of view, okay? But again, not specific questions like, okay, what about this or that model or this or that formula? Okay, there won't be questions about specific formulas, okay? So I will build models, very simple models. I use simple models, quote unquote, because some are not that simple, I admit. But there won't be specific questions about mathematical details, okay? Even though I'll try to be as specific and detailed as possible, okay, in the course, okay, because some of you might be interested in also some details, and I try to do everything as carefully and as precise as possible, okay? But again, I'll also stress this during the course, so do not worry, okay, if you miss some mathematical details, be questions about these pieces. So what I would like you to bring home, okay, here from the course is the mechanisms, okay, and I will spend a lot of time, okay, on mechanisms that drive certain results. Okay? That's why for all the theories we're going to see, I will spend a lot of time also on economic intuition. Okay, so why? So first of all, I'll talk about economic intuition. So why do we get certain results? So what are the mechanisms that drive the result? And then I'll show you the formal model. Okay, so everything can be understood just by using very simple economic intuition. Okay, so that's what I will spend a lot of time on, and that's also what you can. That's also how you can answer questions in the exam. Okay, so using economic intuition. Okay, is it clear? Are there any other questions, comments? Everything is clear. Okay, so if there are no questions, I would like to spend a little bit again on a little bit of time on the outline. Okay, further give you specifics about what we're going to see in each part, and then I start with the first part. Okay, so as I mentioned, okay, so the first topic I'll discuss here is environmental regulation, the very basic stuff. Okay, very simple stuff. So I'll talk in particular about two things that I need, okay, in other parts of the course is the emission trading system. Okay, I'll talk briefly about the cap and trade system, emission trading system, and the carbon taxes. Okay, so I'll talk about these two from a theoretical point of view, and then what I'll do right after that, I'll talk about the two from a practical point of view. And in particular, I'll talk briefly at some length about the EU emission trading system. I guess you're already familiar with, okay? And I'll talk about a very recent paper that has been published that studies, investigates whether the EU emission trading system was indeed able to reduce emissions, okay, in Europe. Okay? Okay, so this is the first thing I'll talk about, and then the second, let's say, practical or more empirical paper is a carbon tax. There is a very nice paper, again, very recently published, studying the case of the interesting case of Sweden, and again, therefore, shows the impact that carbon taxes, in this case, okay, had on Sweden, okay, in Sweden. Okay, so I'll talk about the setup, the framework, and the results, okay, that are found, okay. Okay, then I'll talk about the next topic. So this is just an introductory part, okay. Then the main topic, the first main topic will be trade and environment. So here what I will do, again, since you have all quite heterogeneous, at least is my understanding, a quite heterogeneous background, I'll talk briefly about the traditional trade theory. Okay, some of you, again, will already have seen trade theory in their undergraduate studies. Okay, I hope to add some here by using perhaps a little bit different, I don't know, a different framework. And in particular, then what I'll do is I'll discuss it from an environmental resource point of view. Okay, so to give you an extension of the traditional trade theory to environmental resources, and I discuss the issue of comparative advantage in the production of environmentally intensive commodities. Okay. Why is this important? Well, this is important for many issues. One that is much debated over now recent years, okay, that is the carbon leakage. Okay, I already mentioned it, and there will be a focus on carbon leakage. Also an empirical focus on carbon leakage, and also what can be done from a policy point of view to avoid carbon leakage, because as you might have heard of, the EU approved just last year what is known border carbon adjustment policy, okay? And clearly, in order to understand the rationale for this, you have to know a little bit of the history of the EU emission trading system and the results, and why, therefore, there needs to be a policy, okay, to avoid, or why such a policy is needed. Okay? That's going to be, this policy will be implemented over the coming years. Okay? This is something that I'll discuss. And then, related to this, I'll discuss the issue of trade liberalization and welfare. And again, from adding environmental resources, okay? And therefore, what I will discuss is what are the consequences from a welfare point of view if a country liberalizes trade, okay? And there will be, just to put things up front, okay, to make things clear, okay, so there are two effects. One is the standard that some of you might be familiar with, okay, the standard gains from what's called gains from trade, okay? If we open up our economy to trade, we know that we can benefit from it, okay? Just by trading, okay? And so basically consumer welfare increases, okay, because they can choose from an enlarged budget constraint and a specialization, production, and so on and so forth. But if you consider also environmental resources, the point is that you could specialize in the production of dirty goods rather than clean goods. And in this case, you see you have a contrasting effect, because on the one side you have gains from trade, but on the other, which increases your welfare, but on the other side you have an increase in production of dirty goods, which reduces your welfare. And therefore, we're going to see this from a theoretical point of view first. So what are the policies, okay, that can here contrast, okay, they can help here things, okay, so what should we do from a policy point of view? And then, so this from a theoretical point of view, and then from a practical point of view, we're going to see what are the results from an empirical point of view, okay? So what happened, so what are the effects of trade liberalization, okay, from an empirical point of view? Okay. Last issue, let's see how, since this year I've added some new stuff. Usually what I also, over the past years, what I have talked about is ecological dumping. So what is ecological dumping? Ecological dumping is the idea that by loosening up environmental regulation at home, what you can do is you give your producers a comparative advantage in the production of dirty goods. Okay, so this is something that we're going to see, okay, but it's quite intuitive, okay. And therefore, ecological dumping means that there might be a race to the bottom. Okay, so everybody tries to loosen environmental regulation, okay, because this provides a comparative advantage to firms, okay, to the national champions, and therefore, yes, this can lead to a very bad outcome, okay, because then everybody just tries to reduce environmental regulation, okay. Okay, and this is called ecological dumping. Okay? This is something that if I have time, will explain from a theoretical point of view, okay? Because the empirics is something we've already seen at this point previously. This is for the first part. Then the second part, as I mentioned, is about efficient and optimal use of natural resources, and it's mainly about non-renewable resources. Here, what we are going to do is we're going to develop a very simple model in which natural resources are inputs in the production process. Okay, you can think about energy. Okay, so and therefore it could be oil or gas or whatever, okay? It is non-renewable in the sense that what you extract today is not available tomorrow, okay? And what we are going to do here is we study the optimal and efficient pattern of natural use over time. Okay, so how to optimally use these natural resources, and explain what are the characteristics. Okay, in particular, what kind of prediction can we make in particular in terms of prices. In terms of price, because these models are usually used in order to predict prices over time. Okay, so that's why we are going to see first again theory, and then I'm going to show you data and discuss yes further. Okay, how, because we're going to see that data do not fit well the theory, and then I'm going to add some theory to explain how to fit the model and data. Okay, so again, on the one side theory, and on the other side the empirical part, and then finally I'll extend this model to the case of pollution, stock pollution, and this is going to be a very simple model of climate change. Okay, so we're going to see a very simple model of climate change, taking into account all the externalities that might happen in terms of production and consumption, and therefore we are going to solve yes, the intertemporal trade-offs, taking into account these externalities. Okay. Okay, so the main reference here is this textbook. So if you are able to attend classes, if you're able to follow lectures, or if you're able just to follow slides, okay, you won't need to buy the book or study the book. The book, I think, is quite interesting, well written. Okay, so if you're interested in, for sure, it's a nice book to have as a reference, okay? Not strictly necessary, okay, for passing the exam, okay, at least. And then there are many other papers that are not cited here, but that I'm going to cite clearly once I'll discuss them, okay? They're not here listed. Okay, and you can download these papers if once you're logged in into the UNIBO website. Okay, so you can download them for free. Okay, so you don't free of charge. Any questions? Something I forgot to discuss? Everything clear? Okay, so if there are no questions. Yeah, we are running great on time, so let's start. Okay, so I try to take it slowly. Okay, so I'm trying to take it slowly. So that's why if something is not clear, just let me know. Okay, so I'm trying not to rush. Okay, so it's not that I would like to cover everything. The thing I would like to do is try to cover things as carefully as possible. Okay, so they are clear. Okay, so if some technicalities are not clear, or if you want to discuss some issues, okay, discussions are very welcome, okay, clearly. And therefore, you can always interrupt me, so just do not hesitate, okay, to ask questions or open discussions, debates, okay, they are very welcome, okay, always. Okay? Okay, so first part, okay, so this is, I guess, for some of you, quite boring, okay, because they've already seen this, at least the first part, because I'm going to talk about very basics, okay? But again, this is just because over the years I became aware that some of you, because usually they're heterogeneous, not very well covered in other courses, okay, so I would like to level the playing field, because later on I need these, okay, to discuss other topics, okay, and if, if not everybody's on board, okay, then it's a mess. Okay, so that's why I decided to introduce here very briefly main instruments here in environmental regulation, even though this is not a course, okay, on environmental regulation, okay, just to be clear, because I won't be able to talk about the details, okay, so it's just to level the playing field, okay. Also the discussion here will be very, very simple, okay. So first I'll talk about the theory. In the theory I'll talk about the Guggen taxes and the quotient solution, okay, and then I'll compare the two. Okay. This is therefore just a very brief introduction, and then, which is perhaps kind of more interesting because it's based on very recent papers that you might not be that familiar with, I'll discuss the emission trading system and carbon taxes from a practical point of view. Okay, discussing the EU emission trading system and the case of Sweden. Okay. By the way, I already mentioned this, but the discussion of empirical papers here, they're just to stimulate you, okay? Because I won't be able to go into the technicalities, okay? It's just to give you an idea of what is done from a practical point of view, okay? To start thinking about things rather than, okay, explaining the technicalities. It's not my job here, because this is something you have to do in applied econometrics, okay? How to run regressions and how to do things in a proper way, okay? It's not the place here that would take too much time, okay? Also, I know you have the applied econometrics course right now, okay? So a kind of also mismatch, okay, in doing things, okay? This is just to stimulate your thoughts, okay? And then those of you who are interested in certain topics, okay, I strongly invite you to look papers up and read, okay, technicalities. Because often, I mean, from theory, things are always very nice and neat, okay, because you build simple models, you have your variables, and then you play around with models to get the results, and then some discussion and so on. From an empirical point of view, things are much more complicated, okay, because you never have exactly the data that are needed to carry out tests, and that's why things get trickier, okay, so how to do things. That's what I would like to do here, okay, just to stimulate your thoughts, okay, how to solve. So to tell you solutions, okay, what people came up with, okay, ideas people came up with, how to solve problems, to do things, okay. This is clearly for those of you that are interested in doing some research, okay, so later on. Okay. Okay, so what are the problems addressed here? Okay, there are externalities, so I guess at this point you are you're familiar with what externalities are, and then I'll talk about environmental regulation and empirical evidence. Okay, so here the quotient approach leads to the emission trading system, the Guggen approach leads to environmental taxes, and therefore for the quotient approach we are going to see the EU emission trading system. And here, what I'll do is I'll give you a brief outline of the EU emission trading system, okay, the history, how it evolved over, and the different phases, and some data as well in particular on prices, okay, of emissions. And here the question we are going to see is did the EU emission trading system reduce CO2 emissions? Okay, this is what we're going to see from an empirical point of view. And for the environmental taxes, we're going to see the impact of carbon taxes on CO2 emissions in Sweden. Okay. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so let's start with environmental regulation. Okay, so let me switch here. Okay, so what is an externality? I guess now an externality is something that is not taken into account when taking an action. Okay, Why is this the case? Because, I mean, the explanation here, at least the economist explanation is that it is not taken into account because it's not priced. Okay, it's not priced by the market. Okay, this is the economist's point of view. Okay, so you do not take into account this consequence. Okay, simply because it's not priced. Okay, and you behave in a self-interested way. Okay, so you're self-interested, so it means that you are pursuing your own objectives and when taking an action, and since these consequences are not priced, you are taking, let's say, the wrong actions, wrong from a social point of view. Okay. Examples. Okay. Well, I think these are quite obvious. Okay. But let's go over them because then they're useful for what's going on, for what we're going to see later on. Okay, so okay, the standard example is because you can have externalities due to production or due to consumption. Okay, so let's start with production. So if you are firm, then what you do is you take prices as given and then you optimally choose your factors of production. Okay? And the choice of production technique can lead to environmental pollution. Okay? Okay, so clearly, you do not, by producing, what you do is you want to maximize firm profits because you have shareholders, stockholders, okay, you have to worry about, okay, and that's why what you do is you want to maximize profits. By doing so, you're going to choose the optimal production technique, but this might lead to environmental pollution, and this might not be optimal from a social point of view, because environmental pollution is not priced. Okay, so meaning that you pollute too much compared to what the society would like to have, because pollution is not priced. Okay. In a similar way, okay, you can also have externalities because of consumption. Okay, think about using a car, okay, or transport, modes of transport that pollute the environment. Okay, in this way, you use a good. Okay, you use a car. By driving the car, you pollute the environment, and again, you might pollute too much because this externality pollution is not priced correctly. Okay, not sufficiently priced. Okay, I think everything's clear. Okay, that's why here we have two solutions that address this issue. One is because you see, the problem is, as I said before, not priced. Okay, not priced by the market. That's why here you have clearly two solutions come straightforwardly to your mind. Okay, so one is correct the price. Okay, the other solution is create a market. Okay, so here you see the key here ingredient is, so you do not take into account because it's not priced by the market. So therefore you have already the two solutions. One is price it correctly, so change the price. The other is create the market. Okay, and these are the two solutions we're going to see, which I guess you are familiar with already. But we're going to see them also from a practical point of view. The taxes, Pigouvian taxes, correct the price. Okay, you have either taxes or subsidies. Okay, in this way, you have that the policy maker directly intervenes by correcting the price. Okay, taxes on petrol, taxes on gasoline, okay, or whatever. Okay, are simple examples, and examples I'm going to discuss later on. The solution is create a market. Okay, it's not, so the coercion solution is, it's not that the market leads to a wrong price, it's that there is no market. Okay, that's why create the market. Okay, so this is, for instance, what's done in the emission trading systems. Okay, that are now, we have now many. I'll talk about the solutions later on. Okay, I'll give you several examples. But this is what is done. Will you record the lectures? No, I don't. I'm not recording lectures. Okay. This is done by. Sorry, I'm answering also to the chat. Okay, so sorry if you. This is done in the emission trading systems. Okay, so what is done here is you create a market. Okay, so you have emission permits, and then you allocate. The best thing is clearly auction these emission permits. Okay, so meaning that firms have to buy permits and then trade. Okay, let's trade. Clearly, what you want to do is you want to cap permits, okay, because you want to overall reduce emissions. Okay. And then endogenously the price is determined. Okay, you see the differences between the two systems, because in one case it is the policymaker that has to decide the price, okay, by charging a tax. In the other case, okay, what you do is you simply say that this is the cap on emissions, okay, and then the price is endogenously determined. Okay, so in the first case, in the case of Pigouvian taxes, it is the policymaker that has to choose the correct price. Okay, that's it. In the second case, it is the market, okay, that leads to a price. Okay. So
sorry, but the market is regulated by policymakers, or it is?
Sure. Yes, because what the policymaker caps emissions. Okay, that's what the EU, for instance, does. Okay, so emissions, and I'm going to give you details later on. Okay, but overall, what you do is you have to cap. Emissions, meaning that there are a certain number of allowances. Okay, so permits, and then what firms can do is they can trade them, but then the price is endogenously determined. Okay, because I mean, let's already talk about this now. Okay, what do you want to do with? I mean, what do you want to stimulate? What's the point here? You want to do two things. Okay, first, clearly, what you want to do is you want to reduce emissions. Okay, but then there is also a second thing you want to do. You want to induce green innovation. Okay, so you want to change production technique. Okay. It's not just one thing, okay? It's two things that you would like to obtain, okay? On the one side, clearly you want to reduce CO2 emissions, okay? But on the other side, okay, you want to further innovations in the green sector, okay? So meaning that you want to move firms towards green innovation. So rather than innovating in the dirty technologies, you want to promote green technologies, okay? These are the two things that you want to obtain. And I'm mainly talking here about the first part, because on the second part, something I'll discuss at greater length in the development economics course, okay? But if you are interested, I'll talk about it as well, okay? What's the theory behind that, and what's the empirical? Okay, what does the empirics tell us? Okay, but these are the main things that you would like to. Clearly, the markets regulate, because also you have to you need to check that everybody complies. Okay. Okay. Let's start with if you're okay. Let's continue. Okay. This is kind of. Then let's take a break later. Okay. Okay, so let's start with Pigouvian taxes. Okay. So the idea is here that, as I already mentioned, okay, agents take production decisions. Okay, remember, there is a choice. We're going to see this in at great length. Okay, so the choice of production technique. Okay, they make the wrong decision because the decision is based on wrong prices. And therefore what you can do is, well, simply correct the price through taxes and subsidies. And what would you like to do? Okay, how do you want taxes to be. Okay. Okay, so I have here, first of all, to talk about how agents take actions. Okay, that's something you have for sure seen in the first semester. Okay, so what agents do is they take actions comparing marginal private benefit and marginal private costs. Okay, so what you do is for each act, this is a general approach of the economists. Okay, so it's known as cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so what you do is for each action, what you do is you compare marginal costs and marginal benefits. But here the key word is that they are private. Okay, private benefits and private costs. Okay, marginal private benefits and marginal private costs. And clearly, in these marginal private benefits and marginal private costs depend on market prices. Okay, so think about labor price, capital price, and so on and so forth. All these define your market and the price of the output. Okay, all these define the private marginal benefit and the private marginal cost. Okay, so these are market prices that define, therefore, private marginal benefits and costs. Okay? But what these market prices do not capture is the social cost. For example, of pollution. Okay, so the externality. This is not price. Because in the presence of externalities, okay, the marginal private benefits or costs are different from the marginal social costs and benefits. Okay, here again, the key word is private versus social benefits and costs. Okay, they might be different. Okay, in the case of externalities. In particular, if there is a negative externality, such as pollution, you have that there is overproduction. Okay, compared to the social optimum. I mean, that means that you produce too much. Okay, because you do not take into account the social part. Okay, so the external part. Okay, that's why what you have to do is, and as a policymaker, the policymaker in this case has to know exactly what this social cost is and charge a tax accordingly. Okay, the policymaker in this case has to know exactly what this social cost is and then accordingly charge tax. Here is a very simple example, okay, how this works. Okay, this is very basic stuff. Okay, here you see on the one side you have the marginal private benefit. This would be really, in general, it would be net benefits. Okay, net. Okay, it would be net benefits rather than, it depends on the costs. Okay, okay, should really read net benefits, okay, because net benefits are benefits minus costs. Okay, you see they are decreasing. Okay, they are strictly decreasing because the idea is that the problem at the firm level is a concave one. Okay, so in this way you get an optimal solution. Okay, that's why marginal net benefits are decreasing. Okay, in the emissions. Okay, this is in emissions. And then on the other side here, I have depicted, this would be the blue straight line. On the other side here, I have depicted marginal social costs. Okay, and they are increasing. Okay, in this simple picture. Okay. Now, what is the private solution? What is the socially optimal solution? So the private solution is E hat, okay, because the firm here chooses to emit as long as marginal private net benefits are equal to 0. Okay? Because they do not take into, firms do not take into account the externality. Okay? But since you have marginal social costs, okay, what is the optimal, so this is given by this externality, okay, what is the optimal solution from a social point of view? It is E star. Okay, this is the socially optimal solution. Okay? So you see that E hat is larger than E star. Now, since usually emissions are positively related with production, okay, meaning that what you do is privately, okay, you overproduce compared to the social optimum, okay, because the more you produce, the more you emit. Okay? So there is a positive relationship between emissions and production. So this picture simply tells you that there is overproduction, okay? Meaning that if firms decide autonomously, okay, maximizing profits, therefore not taking externality into account, and what they do is they produce too much, okay, from a social point of view, okay, because E hat is larger than E star, overproduction. Is it clear? Okay, so how should we, so if I'm going, I guess this is very basic. If something's not clear or you do not agree, okay, in this course you're allowed to not agree, okay, so you can disagree. Okay, so if something is not clear or if you disagree, just let me know, okay, if something is, but this is very basic stuff. Okay, so what should you do from a policy point of view if you have Pigugan taxes? In this case, what you have to do is you need a tax. Okay, that is exactly such that, okay, because now you see pollution is no longer, emissions are no longer free of charge, okay, so what you do is, now in this case, you pollute up to the point such that marginal private benefits or net benefits equal the cost of emissions, the marginal cost of emission. What is the marginal cost of emission? It's given by the tax rate, okay? And therefore, what you have to do is, you see here, you have to choose the tax rate such that you exactly obtain the social optimum emission level. Okay, here you see, therefore, what the policymaker needs to know is, it needs exactly to know what the marginal social costs are. Because then you choose the tax rate such that you obtain the socially optimal emission level. Yes?
But this tax rate goes on the, is there no production on the consumers?
Yes, because usually, what you do usually is you tax production, okay? Or, well, it depends on what it is. If you think about consumption, then it could be, then what you do is you tax petrol, for instance, okay? Otherwise, it really depends on how, it depends on the type of, the type of good you're considering, and whether if it's possible or not to measure because often it's also possible to measure the carbon content, okay, directly, and therefore you can tax directly the carbon content, okay. In some cases it's more difficult. Then what you can do is you tax simply production, okay. It depends on the
tax both?
You can also both, but it really depends on the situation, okay. For instance, later on I'll talk about the carbon tax in Sweden, for instance, and then give you more insight on how things can be done. But usually it's easier to tax like petrol or gasoline, okay, and the energy source that's polluting the environment, which is kind of close to the carbon content, okay, that's then emitted, okay? Okay, do you have something else in mind that...
Not really, because the tax, the amount of tax is the decision of the policymaker, right?
Yes.
So it is also the decision whether they want to reduce the demand of the product, the carbon product, or they want to decrease the supply. So depending on that, they can...
Why do you want to reduce the supply? No, let me go back to what I said before. So the carbon tax and the regulation here is the aims are twofold, okay? So on the one side, you clearly would like to reduce, in this case, or let's take a concrete example, CO2 emissions, okay? So this is something you would like to do, but on the other side, it's not necessarily reducing demand, okay? Because what you would like to do is you would like to induce a change in production technique, okay? So substituting dirtier production techniques with cleaner production technique. So, for example, okay, if you have high taxes on I don't know, petrol or whatever, okay, then what you would like to do is two things. On the one side, perhaps, okay, induce, now using the car is more expensive, so you could use more bicycle or electric cars or whatever. That is mean modes of transport that are less polluting and less, that are less, therefore, that emit a lower carbon content, okay? So you see what you do is you change your behavior. This is from a consumer point of view, okay? You change behavior, but the same happens also for the producer. If a producer is taxed, okay, then what the producer tries to do is it switches to less polluting production modes. Okay, this is the first thing that you would like to induce, okay? Therefore, it's not about supply, it's really about the demand, okay, what you would like to do. And then this is the first thing. Then the second thing you would like to do is you would like to promote innovation, okay, and so redirect, what is called redirecting the pace of innovation. So rather than innovating dirty technologies, what you would like to do is promote innovation in clean technologies, okay? And this again, if there is more demand for electric cars, okay, or bicycles, okay, so then what you do is you also promote innovations in these sectors. For instance, also batteries and all the stuff, okay, that's necessary for producing electric cars and so on and so forth, or alternative, okay. Is it clear? So you would like to change behavior of consumers and producers on the one side, but then also this has a second effect that is promoting innovation, okay? So redirecting innovation, okay? By changing the market size, okay, mainly. Okay, is it clear? Any questions so far? Okay, so now we are kind of running late. Okay, so perhaps even though it's not the best moment to stop, but I would like to stop now. Okay, because I'm getting kind of hungry. I guess the same happens for you. Okay, we all need fuel. Okay, so I suggest let's break for lunch, a half an hour lunch break. So meet again at 20 to 2, if it's okay for you. Is it okay? Okay, and then after the break, I'll talk about the quotient solution, show you what the quotient solution looks like, and then talk about the empirics. Okay, so how this has been tested and the results from an empirical point of view. Okay, so have a nice lunch and talk to you later. Bye bye.
Sì, andiamo velocemente, perché c'è
Let's start. Okay. Okay, at home, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so let's start. Okay, let's see the cohesion solution. So as I mentioned before the break, in this case, it's not that the market price is wrong, so the problem is that there is no market. Okay, so the market is missing. And that's why what you try to do is create a market, and then the price will be determined endogenously. And here, the example we're going to see later on is the market for emissions. Okay, so create a market for emissions and allow permits to be traded. Okay, and this is so the biggest at this still today, probably not in the future, but also the oldest is the EU emission trading system. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it in a minute. So I'm not going into the details of the cohesion theory and the cohesion theorem. I hope you are familiar with it. Otherwise, so it's something not clear, just let me know. Okay, so but broadly speaking, the idea is if there are no transaction costs. Okay, this is key here. So if there are no transaction costs, then the market will lead to the efficient solution. Okay, this is the cohesion theorem. And therefore what you have to do is, according to this theory, you just create a market. You have to scale it. You have to supervise. I mean, you have to create a market, and then you have to check that everybody complies with the rules of the market. And then if there are no transaction costs, then the outcome will be efficient from a social point of view. Okay, for those of you who are not familiar and do not have an economics background, okay, so in economics we are always worried about, I mean, not always, but our major concern is about efficiency, okay? So our major concern in economics is about efficiency. So what is efficiency? the efficiency of the market is the case where the market is able to allocate resources without wasting anything. Okay, so meaning that all possible benefits from an exchange are exploited. Okay, this is market efficiency. Okay, so Pareto efficiency in particular. So Pareto efficiency means that if two persons exchange goods, the solution is efficient if you cannot find another solution where none of the parties lose. Okay, this is Pareto efficiency. Okay, so here we are. As economists, our major concern is about efficiency. Okay, so if the market is able to allocate scarce resources in an optimal way, okay, without wasting any opportunities. Okay, this is, and as you well know, efficiency is not always in line with how resources are allocated. Meaning that it can well be that one party gets everything, the other party gets nothing. From an economic point of view, this is an efficient allocation. Okay? So if one party gets everything, the other party gets nothing, this is an efficient allocation. Okay? It's just not. It's not just something that you would not like to have. Okay? So because it's a very unequal distribution. Okay, but this is another property, okay, but not necessarily in line with efficiency. Okay, so how unequal resources are distributed. Okay, but here mainly we are focused, we're interested in efficiency. Okay, from a social point of view. Okay. So here, what you therefore have to do is you would like to create a market and then let the agents freely trade. Okay. No transaction costs means that no costs. Okay, and no additional costs in the transaction. Okay. Because if there are transaction costs, then the outcome depends on who gets what. Okay, and it's not always the case that the outcome is efficient. Okay. So, but in the case of no transaction costs, so you just allocate permits and you get an efficient solution. It is true that the allocation of permits affects the distribution of surplus, but total surplus is the same. Okay. And therefore, what the policymaker has to do is it has just to enforce the market rule and supervise that everybody complies. Okay, that's the only thing that the policymaker has to do. Now, let's see how this works from a theoretical point of view and see how this compares with the taxes. Okay. Okay. Again, this example is similar to the one we've seen before. Two parties, agents, pollute, and they obtain private benefit from it. Could be, therefore, as I mentioned before, net benefits. Okay, if there are also some costs involved. But here the important point is that there are private, okay, benefits, and then you have other agents that suffer from pollution. There are social costs, and they are not clearly again accounted in market prices. Now, here, what is the key here? The key is that, and again, this is something from microeconomics. Okay, so again, those of you who are familiar with microeconomics, it will be quite clear. For the others, I will try to explain this as carefully as possible. So, what are marginal private benefits of emissions? Marginal private benefits for emissions can be viewed as a willingness to pay for emissions. So how much you are willing to pay for an emission, because it's how much you value privately emissions, and that's why it's a kind of willingness to pay for emissions. Okay, is it clear? okay, is it clear? Okay, another example. Okay, so if you have to decide, so you go to a pizzeria, okay, and you have to decide how many slices of pizza to eat. Okay, I mean, an economist would tell you the following story. What you do is you have to, you have to see how much you value each slice of pizza. Okay, so that's why you enter. You're hungry, so you value a lot the first slice. That's why, because it gives you a lot of benefit. Okay, that's why you're willing to pay a lot for the first slice. Okay, then the second slice you're a little bit less hungry. Okay, so you are. I mean, this is a story. Not necessarily, for everybody true, okay, but this is what we economists tell, okay, when we explain it. Okay, for the second slice of pizza, you're less hungry, that's why you're less willing to pay for it, because you get a lower benefit, and that's why you have a lower willingness to pay for it. Okay, the third slice, you're even less hungry, and so on and so forth, and that's why you have a usually decreasing marginal benefit, and that's why you have a decreasing willingness to pay, which gives you a demand function. Okay? Everybody agrees? Now, on the other side, the marginal social cost of emissions can be viewed in a similar way, but in terms of willingness to pay to avoid emissions. Okay, so marginal social cost of emissions. So this is how much emissions cost to the society, and that's why it can be viewed as a willingness to pay to avoid emissions. Okay, so how much one is willing to pay to avoid emissions. Okay, a simple story. Okay, so in one room there is a smoker and a non-smoker. Okay, and they have to share a room. The smoker says, "Well, now I want to smoke a cigarette, okay, because I would like to get the benefit out of it." Okay. The other one is a non-smoker and perhaps also asthmatic or whatever, has health problems. Okay, like, no, please do not. Okay, you see on the other side, on the one side you have the smoker who bought cigarettes and therefore willingness to pay to smoke, and on the other side you have an individual who is willing to pay, perhaps, to avoid smoking. Okay, I give you money, okay, if you do not smoke, okay. And so you see, on the one side you have a demand function, okay, that's given by the willingness to pay for emissions for smoking, okay, and on the other side you have a willingness to pay to avoid smoking. Okay, is it clear? Okay, this can be depicted like this here. Okay. So you see, if you put, I mean, again, if you take the example, I mean, this is in terms of emissions, okay, and not specified individuals who trade here or engage in trading. But if you take the example of smoking and two individuals, okay, you can think about the blue line, okay, blue straight line, the willingness to pay for smoking, okay. And on the other side, the red line would be the willingness to pay for the other individual not to smoke. Okay? And so you see, when they intersect, okay, you get the socially optimal level of smoking in the room. Is it clear? Because let me repeat this, the blue line would be the willingness to pay for emissions. The red line would be the willingness to pay to avoid emissions, and when they intersect, you get the optimal level of emissions, socially optimal level of emissions. Okay, best viewed, okay, in your example with your roommate, okay, who smokes, and you just offer him some money, okay, for not smoking, or, well, clearly, what's the problem there? If there are just two individuals, they have market power, okay? So I know that if I smoke, I cause you some harm, and you're willing to pay to avoid harm, and I might strategically avoid this. I might strategically exploit this. Okay. This is clearly something that you will not want, okay? And that's why this theory does not work for, in the case of two individuals who behave strategically, but it works if there are many individuals who do not have market power, okay? Is it clear? So in general, it does not work for two individuals. Okay? Because I know that by smoking, I cause you some harm, but I know that you're willing to pay me for not causing you harm, so I will strategically smoke just in order to get you to pay me. Okay, you see kind of the game we could enter here. Okay? This is something clearly that does not work. That's why this type of market, so creating a market, does not work for some situations. Okay, it doesn't work here for smokers. Okay, let's share a room. Okay? Because there are too few people, and they might strategically exploit their market power. So just to complete this, but it works if there are many individuals. So none has market power, and so you cannot have a game like this. Sorry.
So if we are in a situation in which there is a monopoly or there is an oligopoly, how does it work? I mean, the Bayesian solution is still applicable?
No, I mean, the perfect solution is, I mean, it's just if there is no one has market power. Okay? But then we know in oligopoly, from oligopoly theory, we know that as the number of individuals stretches to infinity, the market distortion goes to zero. Okay? So if n is the number of participants, okay, goes to infinity, then we know that the market distortion goes to zero. So meaning that the oligopoly converges to perfect competition, okay, if you think about firms, okay, perfectly, or, perfect competition in the sense that you're price takers, okay, so you're not able to influence, so kind of game I said before, That's why you want, I mean, this type of solution works if there are many participants. It does not work in cases where you have just few participants, okay, which can then distort. But in principle, this is just to give you an idea, okay, of how this could work. Okay, now I'm going to give you more details, okay, how it works in practice. Clear? Everything clear? Okay, you see here you get the endogenous price. So just to finish here the comment, okay, you get the price of permits endogenously without intervention. Okay, so just create a market. Okay, just create a market. Okay, this is in principle. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about it from a more practical point of view. Okay, just in principle, you should just create a market, allocate permits. So meaning that in the case of smokers, either allocate the right to smoke to one or the other party. Okay, if there are no imperfections, like I said there are. Okay, but if there are no imperfections, then they will trade these permits. And you will reach, without other intervention, okay, so the social optimum, okay, which in the case of smoking would be the optimal number of cigarettes smoked by the individual, and therefore the price of these permits, okay, to smoke. Is it clear? Okay, now this has been exploited in order to create markets, okay, for tradable emissions, okay, at supranational level. Okay, but how is it done? Okay, in reality, how is it done? In reality, it's done through cap and trade. Okay, so cap and trade. So what you do is you cap emissions, meaning that you define at the aggregate level what the overall number of the number of emissions are, okay, what the emissions are overall, they're capped. Okay? In particular, what you have is you have targets. I'm going to talk about it in the case of EU in a minute. Okay, so meaning that over the years you want permits to be fewer and fewer, and but they are capped, and then you let individuals trade. Okay? Now, in this case, how does it look like? Okay? So in this case, what you have to do is you have to cap emissions at the socially optimal level. Okay? So why is this picture different from the one I mentioned before? So here you see you don't have any cap. Okay? Why in reality do we need cap? Okay, if you think about tradable permits, okay? Emission permits. So why does a picture like this here not work? Okay, what's kind of missing here, and why it's working with a cap? Okay, so what might be the problem here? Well, in principle, you don't need. I mean, here you don't need a target, right? Because here the theory I told you before, okay, it is the market that self-regulates. Okay, because think about the example of smoking, okay, now again. Think about the problem closest to us, okay? So if you have individuals in the room, you have many individuals, okay, that share rooms, okay? But some would like to smoke and some would like not to smoke, okay? They have to find an agreement. So here what I'm telling you is that some are willing to pay for smoking, others are willing to pay for not smoking, okay? And therefore what this example tells us is there are sufficiently many individuals, there are no transaction costs in the sense that they are able to find an agreement, okay, without having to go to a fight, okay, hire lawyers or whatever, okay, so hours and hours of discussion. Let's say they're reasonable people, okay, and find an agreement, okay, because these are the assumptions of no transaction costs, okay, then they are able to find a socially optimal solution. Socially optimal solution means that everybody's happy. Okay, so the smokers are happy and the non-smokers are happy. Okay, because for instance, the non-smokers get compensated. Okay, they get compensated, they get paid by the smokers. Okay, but now is it clear this example? Now, but now think about CO2 emissions. Okay, so what's missing here? You see, the blue line is quite obvious, okay, because these are firms that are willing to pay to emit. Okay, why are they willing to pay to emit? Because they have dirty industries. Okay, they are dirty industries, and therefore, in order to be able to produce, they need to pollute the environment. Okay, at least to some extent. So therefore, the blue line is quite obvious. But what's the red line? The red line are the social costs. This would be people that somehow negotiate with the firms. Okay, contract with firms. So that's quite a difficult thing to do. Okay, so here we would need people, okay, that try to negotiate with the firms, okay, and that's not obvious, okay, to get firms and people in a room and try to work out a solution, okay. That's why it's easier to implement in terms of a cap-and-trade system, okay. So it is the policymaker that tries to infer what is the optimal, or you can't probably read it, the E star, okay? The socially optimal emission level. Okay? It's the policymaker that says that for the upcoming years, these are the allowances, okay? the emission permits. Okay? And clearly, how has the policymaker to choose these emission permits? It has to choose these emission permits such that marginal benefits equal marginal social costs. Okay? So again, it has somehow to know the right schedule, okay? Which in principle, in the causal theory, is not necessary. Okay? But in practice, if you think about emissions, CO2 emissions, it is much more convenient to do so. Okay? So therefore, it's the scientists, okay, that tell us, okay, you see, because CO2 emissions, they concentrate, I mean, they accumulate in the atmosphere. Okay? That's why, that's how we get global warming. Okay? CO2 emissions, they accumulate in the atmosphere, and that leads to the global warming we are worried about. Okay? If you think about climate change, okay, then there are many other cases, but the climate change case is perhaps the most known, and that's the one I'm going to discuss also later on. It's the easiest one. So since CO2 emissions accumulate, okay, it's the scientists that tell us, okay, you see, if it goes on like this, okay, then temperature, world's temperature will increase, and it will have such and such consequences on our economies, okay, on our world. And that's why you have to curb emissions. Okay? And that's the way how emission targets are set. Okay. Okay, you see here, if this is clear, okay, now here you see the comparison between the three cases we have seen. Okay. Now we have seen the cohesion theory without intervention of the policymaker. So the policymaker just creates the market, and then agents freely trade. Okay. Then we have seen taxes, the good taxes, and we have seen also the cap and trade system. Okay. And you see, if properly implemented, they all lead to the same solution. Okay? They all lead to the same solution. So the cohesion theory, the red and the blue line exactly give you the endogenous price, okay, of the externality and the emissions or whatever we are talking here about. Cap and trade, we have to cap emissions at a socially optimal level, and then let the agents trade. By the way, I'm going to tell you in a minute how this is done, okay, also from a theoretical point of view, the trading between agents, and the tax. Okay, so they give you, they give you optimally implemented, they give you the same result. Okay? Everything clear? Okay, this is what I just said. Okay, so in the case of Peruvian taxes, the policymaker has to know exactly what the marginal social costs are. This is clearly demanding. Okay, and the same also if you set a cap. Okay, also in this case, you need to know what the marginal social costs are. It is not the case in the pure cohesion. Cohesion case, okay, where you have the agents freely trade. Okay, if you remember the smoking example, okay, agents trade in order to pollute, and agents, so therefore, willingness to pay for pollution and to avoid pollution. If they freely trade, then you get. So you don't have to do anything. You get the efficient result. Okay, without government intervention. Is it clear? Three cases. Okay, now last but not least, perhaps. Okay, so still in the comparison, I would like to consider another case where there are two firms that pollute, and I would like to a little bit talk about the trading, okay, in the case of cap and trade, okay, how the trading occurs. And now consider two firms that pollute, and let's determine the optimal emission level for both firms. Okay, given that there is a cap on emissions. Okay, how is this done? This is done by equalizing marginal benefits and marginal costs. Okay, again. Okay, let me show you a picture of this. Okay, so here you have this figure here. Okay, this here on the x-axis, the length or the width of the x-axis here is efficient emissions. So emissions are capped, okay, like in the EU emission trading system. Okay, so you have an overall amount of allowances or permits. What now firms can do is they can trade these permits. Okay, and I would like to show you how this is done. Okay, in this case, we have two firms. Very simple. It's just two because it allows me to draw a very simple figure. Okay, clearly, you can extend this to many firms. Now you have two firms, firm A and firm B. Firm A is from the left to the right, so this would be the 0 for firm A. Firm B is from the right to the left. Okay. So I'm depicting here marginal benefits of emissions of firm A, which are the blue, and marginal benefits of emissions for firm B. Okay? And again, you can think about these schedules as demand and supply functions. Okay, like I said before, because now it really applies what I said before. Okay, so you can view this since marginal benefits are willingness to pay to get permits. Okay? And therefore, if you compare the two schedules, you see who wants to buy and who wants to sell permits. Okay? So how is this done? Okay, so you have here another picture here. Okay, so here. So you allocate in this case the permits, giving 1/2 of permits to one firm and 1/2 permits to the other firm. Okay. And then let firms freely trade. Okay, and see what happens in this case. Now what you can see is that firm A has a larger willingness to pay for emission permits than firm B. Okay, meaning that firm A would be interested in buying emission permits from firm B because it values emission permits more than firm B does. Okay, is it clear? So in this point over here, an initial condition, firm A values emission permits more than firm B does. And this therefore opens the trade, and therefore firm A is going to buy permits from firm B up to the point where marginal benefits are equalized. Okay? And so you see this leads to the optimum allocation. This, by the way, gives you the value, the marginal shadow value of emissions. In this case, it's a price. If there is indeed a market, it's price, but it's not just a shadow. Price is indeed a market price. Okay? And this will be this level here, and this should be equal to the tax rate if there was instead an exogenous tax. Okay, and so you would have the same value allocation. Okay, so this would be the corresponding tax rate, the price of emissions. Yes.
So just to clarify, the cap exactly in the middle?
No, sorry. The cap is given by the overall amount of emission permits. In the middle, you have the allocation. So how many permits got one firm and how many got the other. So they're not option costs. They're just randomly assigned to one firm and the other firm.
So in this case, both approaches have different outcomes.
Both approaches have different outcomes.
one.
Why those things?
Because in the one you see the line, the table emissions are exactly split evenly, whereas with the taxes you
No. This is just a initial condition. Okay, so you start. This is what was done at the beginning. Okay, so to talk about the emission trading system. But at the beginning, it was just given freely without costs. Okay, allowances. They were just given to firms, and the firms could exchange them, and so the price was established. Okay. Nowadays, they are much more. So what you have that firms are ending up with too many permits, other firms are ending up with too few permits compared to what they would like to have. Okay? This is what happens here. Okay? So you're just handing out randomly permits to firms without knowing exactly how many one would like to have, how many another would like to have. And then you just let trade. Okay? It's just like the two of you. Okay, one is a smoker, the other is not a smoker. I don't know how much you would like to pay for smoking, I don't know how much you would like to pay for not smoking. So what I'm going to do is I'm just giving you the rights, okay, to stop in smoking. Okay, or I could give half. Okay, so I'm saying that you could smoke, I don't know, 5 cigarettes a day, okay, and then just and you 5 stops. And then you can exchange. Okay, this is what's done. So it's just initial condition. It's not that it's an optimum. Okay? I don't know what's the optimum because you see, I don't need the information because then I let the market work. Okay, that's the idea of the market. Okay, so I need fewer information here. Okay, so the only information I need is the one given by the scientists. Okay, the scientists tell me, okay, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere has to be no larger than this level. Okay, then I know that we cannot emit more than this and that over the upcoming decades. Okay, this is what's done. And then therefore I cap emissions, and then I just hand out permits and let firms do the job. Okay, determine the price. So why is this important? Because of what I said before. It's not just, there are 2 effects. The one effect is that I would like to reduce emissions by changing their behavior. But the other one is also I would like to promote innovation. Okay? I would like to do both of these.
Okay. So just eventually once the tax phase out, is that going to be considered transaction costs if it was a long-term?
You would like to phase out?
Yes. So in this scenario, you're saying that the tax is used as a shadow price for emissions, correct? So would you then, over time, phase out the tax because it could be considered an additional transaction cost?
Okay, so in the long run, if the productivity of technologies, green technologies, is larger than the productivity of dirty technologies, you can phase out taxes. Yes. So this is because one thing I said is that taxes should promote innovation in green technologies.
Okay. I think more my question was that if once the market is functioning and there's an established trade.
Oh no, you need
you still have the tax in place.
In this case, you don't have taxes, you have just the market cap.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need the cap. So without the cap, you don't have the price. Okay, because it's not a scarce resource. Okay, so in economics, we have that only scarce resources are priced from emission permits. If there is no cap on emission permits, so there are no emission permits, it's just a free good. Free good has 0 price. Okay? So in order to carbon the price, you need the market to be capped. Okay? So it's a scarce resource. Only scarce resources are priced. I'm not sure if I'm good.
Yeah, you're sort of touching on it. I'm trying to understand because I thought the cap is the efficient.
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
And you've got the tax in the middle where it makes the.
This one here.
Yeah.
But this is not the tax. This is just how I allocate the permits.
Okay, sorry.
Now this is just the permits. Okay, the number of permits. This one here is a tax.
Yeah.
This will be the corresponding tax rate. Yeah. This will be the optimal tax rate that corresponds to this outcome.
Yeah, but overall you're saying basically the tax will remain because there's a cap in place?
No, here you don't need, okay, I understand the tax, we haven't written the tax, so there's confusing, okay? But the idea was just, okay, perhaps I should have another slide, okay, with that. Okay, so just forget about it. Yeah, this is the endogenous price. Okay, this endogenous price, it would correspond to a tax if there was no cap and trade system in place. Okay, let's say this, okay? So forget about tax here. So here you have a cap and trade system, so you have capped emissions, allocate permits randomly, let individuals trade, you get an efficient outcome for firms. Okay, so they optimally use the permits. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, instead of the cap and trade system, what you should have, in order to get exactly the same result, is a tax rate due by this price. Okay, sorry, too much information on the slide is kind of confusing. Is it clear? Is it clear, everybody? Clear?
This is tax in the Piguvian tax.
Yeah, the tax is always a Piguvian tax, yes. Okay, so here, just a summary again. So price of tradable emission permits is determined endogenously, and it's equal to the tax, okay, the exogenous tax. Okay. So there are always the two sides of the same coin, okay. So on the one side, either endogenously determined if capped correctly, or the tax, okay, if chosen correctly. But at the end of the day, the two coincide. Okay, the price endogenously determined has to be equal to the tax. Okay. Okay, in the case of the Piguvian tax, the policymaker has to know marginal benefit of each firm in order to determine the optimal tax rate. This is not necessary in the case of the market. Okay. Okay. So yeah, in this case, you need to know exactly both curves in order to set the optimal tax, okay, such that you get optimal emissions. Okay. This is not necessarily the case in the case of cap and trade, because in cap and trade, the only thing you need to know is what the overall amount of emissions are, okay, and then let the firm trade. So you need fewer, I mean, you need less information, okay? But as I mentioned, okay, the big problem here is transaction costs, okay? Okay, are there questions or comments on this? This is clear. This is very, I mean, again, this is not an in-depth analysis of environmental regulations. It's just to make things clear. Okay, so what the Piguvian tax is, what the cohesion approach is, and that the two are the same, are different sides of the same coin. At the end of the day, okay, they give you the same result if optimally implemented. Okay. But now, what I would like to discuss is how this works in the real world. Okay? And so, I would like to start with the EU emission trading system. Okay? So, just to give, I'm sure you're well aware, okay, with the EU emission trading system. I just want to review the main things. Okay? And then I'll start with the research question. Okay? So, what are the questions that economists are interested in? Okay? Okay, it was launched in 2005, and therefore it's the world's first international emission trading system. It puts a price on carbon, okay, and the aim is twofold, as already mentioned before. So on first case, its aim is to reduce emissions, but on the other side also it wants to induce green innovation. Okay, so what's called redirecting, okay, directing the pace of innovation. So which direction innovation should go? Dirty versus green innovation. Now, what are the sectors covered? This changed over, I mean, okay, but so the sectors covered for CO2 are heat, power generation, very energy-intensive industries, and then also commercial aviation. And in particular, what's interesting is that in some sectors, only plants, that is, installations above a certain size, are included. Okay, that has been exploited by researchers for doing some tests. Okay, so you could well have that firms that are comparable in terms of size, one is regulated, the other is not regulated. Okay, simply because in one installation, in one case the installation was large and the other one it was too small. Okay, but otherwise the firms were comparable in terms of all other characteristics. Okay. Now there were different phases and this is important for getting the results. Okay, we're going to see later. So the first phase was the pilot phase. In the pilot phase, 2005-2007, you have a cap on allowances set at the national level, and only CO2 emissions from power generators and energy-intensive industries. And here, the important thing is that allowances were given to business for free because they were not auctioned. Okay. And what happened is the following. So you had supply that exceeded demand, and as a consequence, you had that the market price, in particular the spot price, okay, was close to zero, even though the forward price was above the spot price. Okay, so the spot price is the price today, the forward price is a forward-looking price. Okay, you could have, well, that the spot price is close to zero, but the forward price is larger than zero because you expect more stringent policy tomorrow. Okay, and that's why you have a forward price that's larger than the spot price. Okay, is it clear? And that's important for what we're going to see later on. Second phase, 2008-2012, we had a reduction in emissions, meaning that there was a lower cap. New countries joined. There was a reduction in free allocation and introduction of auctions. And then we had also, there was a penalty for non-compliance, which was increased from 40 euros to 100 euros per ton. Okay, so more stringent policy. The problem for this phase was that, unfortunately, this is what now we're going to empirics. Okay, you never have a straightforward result because life happens, unfortunately. Okay. So what happens during this phase? Well, in 2008 we had a very severe financial crisis. Okay, financial crisis hit firms, and clearly, once firms are hit, what they do is they reduce production. By reducing production, you reduce also demand for emission permits. Okay. And therefore, this again led to a collapse of the market. Okay, kind of. I'm going to show you data on prices. Okay, life happens, unfortunately. Okay? That makes the work for an econometrician hard. Okay, because unfortunately there are many other things, okay, that happen, not just the policy that affect the econometrician perhaps might want to investigate. Third phase. 2013-2020, EU-wide cap on emission, auction instead of free allocation, and then you have even more sectors. Okay? And now we are in phase 4. Phase 4, you have sectors covered must now reduce emissions by 43% compared to 2005 levels. Okay. And this is obtained through a annual cut of emission allowances of 2.2% from 2021 onwards. Okay, so over time you see the cap becomes more stringent. Okay, so it's more, you have fewer and fewer emission permits. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Okay, these are the results, and these are the results of one can see in the data, but then this leads to research questions. Okay. So what are the results? Okay, this is from the EU Commission. Okay. The EU Commission states that EU emissions were reduced by 22% between 1990 and 2017. Okay. And the economy grew by 58% over the same time period. Okay, so quite strong result. Okay, you see, because you have to remember, growth, economic growth means that you have increased production, but increased production usually also means increased emissions. Okay, but over this time period, okay, you had quite some growth. Okay, but you had a cut in emissions by 22%. Okay, is it clear? So this is the result given by the EU Commission, okay, in their official statement. Well, now this leads to research questions, okay, for the economists. Okay, now, well, the first question, the one we are going to address right now, is the following: but how much of this reduction is due to the emission trading system? So can we be sure that all this 22% is due to the emission trading system? Because in order to be sure that the emission trading system was effective, okay, we need to test it. Okay? We need some figures. Okay? It's not enough to show that there was a reduction in 22%. There could be other reasons. Okay? The question is, would the figure be the same if there was no cap and trade system in place at all? Okay. Was it successful, or the extent to which it was successful? Okay. Is it clear, the question? Second question, let me go to the third one here. Okay. Was there any carbon leakage? Now, what is carbon leakage? Something that I'm going to discuss at some length later on, okay, but just to give you an idea now, right now, what the problem is. Okay. So given that this is not a worldwide cap and trade system, it's just EU cap and trade system. Okay. Meaning that we have put, let's say, a price on carbon for some EU firms. Okay. But what might well have happened that some of these firms relocated or simply reduced production, and production somehow increased abroad. Meaning what? Meaning that you have fewer emissions here in the EU, but you have more emissions abroad. And this is known as carbon leakage. Okay, this is known as carbon leakage. So therefore the question is, was there any carbon leakage? I'm not going to answer this question now, but I'm going to offer some lectures. Okay? So in a couple of lectures I'm going to answer. I explain first from a theoretical point of view what we mean with carbon leakage, and then I'm going to show you data on this, okay? Some studies on this. Okay? Third question, and this goes back, it's third really should be the second because it's related to the first, and it's remember what the aim of the cap and trade system is. So the first aim is to reduce emission. The second is to promote green innovation. Okay? And therefore the research question is, what was the effect on green innovation? If there was any. Okay? And again, this is something that we would like to estimate. Okay? What was the impact on green innovation? Okay, this is a question I'm not going to answer here. because I'm dealing with this in another course. Okay? But for those of you who are interested in it, I can give you references and talk about it. Okay? But these are all the problems that one might be interested. Clearly, other related questions like, okay, what was the impact on firm performance? Okay? So many other questions. I would like to go into more micro problems. Okay. Also, there are some studies on firm performance and the effects of the EU emission trading system. Okay, before going to the data, I would like to just give you some other information. Okay, there are many other emission trading systems. Now, there is a famous one in California, there are two in Canada, there are Japan, there are many around. China has several regional emission trading systems, but just in 2021, so just very recently, they started a national one. It's going to be in the upcoming years the largest, world's largest emission trading system. At the moment, it regulates more than 2,200 companies from power sector, and it's expected over time to cover more and more entities, estimated to cover 40% of national carbon emissions. And the current pilot system will be the regional ones that are already in place now for several years. They're going to transition into the national. So this is why the Chinese national emission trading system will be in the upcoming years the largest in the world. Important to have a look at. If you want a data, I'm going to show you some, but there are some data, okay, where you can get data if you're interested in carbon pricing. There are these two websites where you can look at, well, on the one side, ETS map, where you can get maps on all the systems that are in place. So you can see worldwide where these systems are in place and how they work also. They have a kind of summary description of the main characteristics, okay, of this emission trading system, for those of you who are interested. And they have prices, okay, historical prices. Okay, so you can see, you can have a look at how historical prices report over. Okay, so here you see, these are, I don't know how much you can see, probably nothing. These are countries with different with emission trading system in place and other prices, so you can't read anything. So, yeah. Well, if you can look it up, it's not particularly interesting, just to give you an idea. Okay, here you can see that prices are very heterogeneous. This is the largest one. This is the European system. This is the European one, and the first one is Alberta. And then Australia, and then you have Beijing, the third one, and so on and so forth. We see that the prices are very heterogeneous. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. So last minutes. Okay. Here, what I would like to talk is now about. I would like to finish the emission trading system by trying to answer the first question. Okay, so remember the first question was of these 22 reduction over 1990 to 2017. So how much of it was due to the EU emission trading system? Okay, and there is a very recent paper published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Science by these two authors that looks at this question. The question is EU emission trading system and the reduction of CO2 emissions, and the answer to the question is already in the title. Okay? And the answer is, despite low prices, you're going to see data on this. Okay? Low prices mean that the carbon price is very low. Okay? The authors conclude that the EU emission trading system was able to reduce emissions. Okay? And they estimate. And I would like to talk about this. The methodology is quite, I mean, the idea of this is quite smart. And what's the time span is, let's see if I see. Let's see. Yeah, the time span is 2008 and 2016, between 2008 and 2016. Okay. Okay, let's see data. Okay, so here you see the data. These are the carbon prices in the EU emission trading system from 2006 or 5. Oh, 2005. Sorry, 2005. 2005 to 2022 or 21. 20. And you see that what I said before, okay, here in 2008, there was a collapse of the market because of the financial crisis, also because of oversupply. Okay, on the one side, then there was an increase. But otherwise, you see for a very long time period, and in particular the time period considered in the paper, the price of carbon was very low, close to zero. Okay, below 10 euros. Okay, very, very low. And therefore the question is, despite this low price, was the system able to influence CO2 emissions? Okay, because what one might expect is, well, if the price was low, then it had no effect because the policy was not very stringent. Okay? And so you expect the policy not to be very effective. Is it clear? Just by looking at the price. Well, the price is too low, and therefore it's like, okay, it's just like having a zero price on carbon, and so it had no effect. The conclusion might be that no effect on CO2 emissions. Okay. That's the hypothesis that the authors would like to test. But the claim is just the opposite. It's that the EU emission trading system was successful in reducing emissions. Okay. And therefore the authors conclude that low prices can be compatible with decarbonization. Okay. And why is this the case? Because what matters, this is conclusion of the authors, is the credibility of the institution, and that is to say, the expectation of more stringent policy in the future. Because remember, the forward price was always above the spot price. Okay, so it's not the price today that influences behavior, but it's the forward price. Okay, also because remember, with pricing carbon, you would like to do two things: cut emissions, but also redirect research. Okay, so that's why, in expectation of more stringent policy tomorrow, what firms do is they change behavior already now, okay, because they expect the policy to be more binding tomorrow, okay, the constraint to be more binding tomorrow. And that's why just the credibility of the institution, okay, induces a change in the behavior. Okay? And not necessarily the price today. It's just that the EU is a credible institution, and its commitment to reducing emissions is sufficient to induce a change in the behavior. Okay? Redirecting research and already changing production technique today and behavior today, more generally. Okay? Is it clear? This is the idea. Okay, let me let me briefly talk about how this is done, okay, how they do the research, because it's kind of tricky. How would you, I mean, how can you test such a thing, okay? I mean, how can you test the effectiveness of such a policy? Okay, here, the idea of the authors is the following. Okay, what they did is they constructed a counterfactual of emissions. A counterfactual. How is this counterfactual constructed? Well, this is now kind of technicality. Okay? Those of you interested in, again, look up the paper, okay, and you get an insight. But the idea is that what you do is you construct, I mean, you behave like, I mean, you try to construct something like a randomized control trial. Okay, now we are all familiar with this term, okay, because of the approval of drugs, okay, COVID vaccine and so on. But you have for sure heard about randomized control trials. Okay, what is a randomized control trial? Okay, they're usually done in approving drugs or vaccines or whatever. Okay, what you do is you create two groups. Okay, one is called the control group, and the other is called the treated group. Okay, so what you do is you give the control group, you give in the case of vaccines or drugs or whatever, you give the control group placebo, and the treated group, you give it the vaccine or the drug, okay, you would like to test. What you need, clearly, you need very large groups. Okay, that's something we have seen now again with the vaccines, okay, because of heterogeneity, okay, they might work, might not work. What you would like to avoid is that they work just in some groups with some characteristics, okay. You would also like to check what are the side effects of drugs, okay. That's why you need large groups, okay, because by having large groups, you eliminate heterogeneity. If you get two large groups, you are sure that the result is not driven, I mean, you reduce the risk that the result is not driven by unobserved heterogeneity. Okay. And clearly in the case of vaccines, also you would like large groups in order to have to see what the side effects are. That's something that you can only observe if you have large groups. And then what you do is you check the differences. Okay? So how these two groups behave differently. Okay? This is called, I mean, then it's a randomized control trial because you are allocating leaders randomly. Okay? That's why it's called a randomized control trial. In economics, they're trying to do the same, both creating such experiments or mimicking such experiment. And here it's a case of mimicking such an experiment. What did the authors do? They constructed a synthetic U, it's called like this. Okay, so meaning that a sample of firms, okay, that before the treatment was exactly the same as the group that then got treated. Here the treatment means that they were subject to the emission cap. Okay? So you have two groups. Firms that are not regulated under the EU emission trading system and firms that are treated. So what you would like to do is you aggregate those non-treated firms such that their performance is very similar to the treated group before the treatment. Because then if you observe the difference after the treatment, you have like an experiment that I explained before. Is it clear? So you construct, okay, kind of a synthetic sample of firms. Okay, so using weights. Okay, so you have to aggregate these other firms in such a way that their behavior is similar to the firms that then got regulated under the EU emission trading system. Is it clear? And then what to do is you observe just the result once the EU emission trading system was in place. Is it clear? And for the technicalities again, how this is done, because in this case, in particular case, there are some tricky problems, for example, two different data sets. But again, the idea is just the one I said before. Okay? So you would like a situation like, would like to have a situation akin to the one in the approval of, clinical approval of drugs. Okay? So a treated group and a non-treated group, and then just check the differences. Okay? Only that in this case, you have to construct, okay, artificially the non-treated group. Okay? And you want to construct it in such a way that it's as similar as possible to the treated group. Okay? These are the results, and then I'm going to show you some data on it as well. But if something is not clear, just let me know. Okay, just 5 minutes and I'm going to stop. Okay, so the results are the following. So the authors conclude that over the time span 2008-2016, EU emission trading system saved about 1.2 billion tons of CO2, which is roughly 3.8 of EU total emissions over the period. And this is compared to a world without EU emission trading system. Okay, this is because here, remember, the comparison is between a world without EU emissions, without the cap and trade system. But this 3.8% is almost half of EU-wide Kyoto target. And the Kyoto target of greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 is a major contributor. It's 8%. Okay, so the target was 8%, and 3.8, which is almost half, is due to the cap and trade system. And in particular, energy production and large industrial polluters emitted 11.5% less compared with the counterfactual, without the emission trading system in place. Here are some figures here, okay, so the treated versus the non-treated group. Okay, so here, you see here, just to give you again some additional information how this is done. Okay, so you see here, you construct the counterfactual, okay, because the black line here is the treated group. Okay, these are the firms, or even better, the installation, the plants, okay, that are production plants that are regulated under the EU emission trading system, while the yellow one here is the counterfactual. Okay, so you would like to construct this sample such that the distance before the treatment, and the treatment here is 2005, are as close as possible. That's how you construct the sample. And then just treatment here, of course, and then you see the difference. Okay, what happened? Here, this is the counterfactual. So you see, even without the EU emission trading system here, the authors predicted their greater reduction in emissions. Okay. But with the emission trading system in place, you have much stronger. And here, the difference is the treatment. It's like in drugs, okay, like in the vaccine. Okay? If I give you a placebo, some might well have positive effects, beneficial effects, because of a placebo. We know that placebo can boost the immune system, and you will just get better because of a reaction of the immune system. Okay? So think you get a drug that helps you, and then you get better because of boosting of your immune system. That's why whether a drug, how strong a drug works, or vaccine works, you have compared with placebo. Okay? That's what's done here. Okay. Here you have what's called bootstrapping. Okay, so you can never be sure that you don't have point estimates. You have usually a range of variation. Okay, so here this is the range of variation that you can have. Okay, so and this is estimation for the. So there will be the gray area here. Okay, the confidence interval 95%. Okay, if you do some bootstrapping. And the blue line is the point estimate, and this is done for the energy sector. Okay, you see for the energy sector, this is a very strong reduction. It would be the 11.5% compared with the counterpart. Is it clear? Okay, are there questions?
Yeah, sorry, was this report, was it in the textbook or was it separate?
None of this is very recent paper. This is the paper I cited above.
Oh, sorry, so you cited it already. So you cited it already in the slides?
Yes, it's here. Yeah, there are many. I mean, okay, this paper here. Yeah, because the textbook is quite old. Okay, so I've added here a lot of new stuff. Okay, compared to that. Okay, so textbook for me is just a skeleton like work on. Okay, so it's just a guide. So the main reference, but then I use a lot of more recent papers. Things in more interesting. Okay, so thank you for attention, and if you want to meet again next Tuesday, we're going to talk about taxes. We're going to talk about Sweden, another experiment. Okay, thanks again, and bye-bye. Have a nice day and have a nice week. Bye-bye.